I got a gift for you guys. Should we do a trick with these? Drop it in, face down, right? Put it back in there. It's lost in the deck. Think of a number. Don't say it yet. We can do 47, but we're gonna count down, and that's kind of a big number. That's the 47th card. This does not have your signature because I asked her what number to pick. 46, stop! Take that card, don't look at it, hold it against your chest. That is the 47th card. Give me the rest of these.
Holy shnikes, that's amazing. I wonder what Randy Pitchford put in my copy of Tiny Tina's Robot Tea Party. Oh. Okay. That was a good one. All right, let's just, okay, we're just gonna get right into this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about KOTOR 3 and its potential story, but this never saw the light of day. The following information comes from videogame247.com. That will be linked in the description down below. Huge shout out to them for the awesome interview with Chris Avellone, whose work still does remain in Star Wars. He is going to be writing for Jedi Fallen Order, but it is not KOTOR. So let's get into this information and discuss further. Once work wrapped on KOTOR 2, Obsidian was ready to make a third game in the acclaimed RPG series. Unfortunately, it never came to pass, but here's what was planned according to one of the writers. Speaking to Chris Avellone at Reboot Develop, I asked if Obsidian ever had a story planned for Knights of the Old Republic 3, and it did. Here's the basic premise in Avallone's words, and this will hurt. When we finished the second one, we were all trying to restore our lives back to sanity, Avellone remembers. We did start working on the third game pitch because we always imagined the trilogy. Even when working on the second game, we tried to foreshadow what Revan was doing in the second game, and he wasn't always just ruthlessly and mindlessly blowing everything up. He actually had a larger plan because there was some greater manipulation and threat going on, which for those who haven't played it yet, I'm not going to spoil it, but the end of KOTOR 2 is a cliffhanger, and obviously so because they did plan on making a third. The third game involved you as a player character following where Revan went and then taking the battle to the really ancient Sith Lords who are far more terrifying than the Darths that show up. These guys would be just monsters. These would have a level of power that was considerable, but at the same time you'd be able to dig more into their psychologies and their personalities, their history, and even how they dealt with the player, how they talked with the player, the different powers they cultivated and developed. And for some of them, like, they're the ancients, so they're not just ruling a solar system but swaths of the galaxy. So you'd be taking on extreme, extraordinary powers in KOTOR 3, which sounds a bit familiar for those who have read the Revan Old Republic book that came out that was initially supposed to be KOTOR 3 as well. It was written by Drew Karpyshyn, who did help write on the original KOTOR, and that was his vision for the ending of that series. And in that book, there were actually ancient Sith Lords who pretty much drained the Force out of planets and left parts of the galaxy completely wrecked, so it seemed like Obsidian and original BioWare had the same path of mind. So the places you travel to, you'd see how they left their stamp on that world or that solar system or whatever collection of moons. You'd see how horrible that was. Part of that environment would tell a story about that. That would be a great epic way to end the trilogy. The Old Republic are out there, we didn't get a chance to do it. Quite honestly, I found this very reminiscent of Paragus from KOTOR 2, the first location that you actually explore in that game. What happens is the place is completely devoid of life except you, Atten, and Kreia, and you're trying to figure out pretty much the past of what happened here. How did the machines go crazy? What went wrong at the Paragus mining facility? And it seems like they're taking that concept and putting it into every single possible planet in KOTOR 3, or what it could have been rather. Which also sounds really neat because this is sort of what I was talking about with the initiation of the Old Republic in a previous video where Lucasfilm had confirmed they're working on something in the Old Republic era, which is that you sort of got to see planets develop, and by the third KOTOR, planets have developed ways of life and policies, and then you see in KOTOR 3 potentially that could have been ripped away entirely based off the changes that the Sith Lords had made when they had arrived there. The article continues on to say, these ancient Sith Lords would be initially mysterious, but they wouldn't be unknowable like Snoke in the newer films. Avellone thinks the issue with that character is that he has too much mystique, where these evil beings would have interesting and varied origin stories you could uncover. Avellone isn't entirely sure why the game never happened, but he speculates that it could be down to internal politics. Now, I'm not the biggest supporter of The Last Jedi. I certainly don't think it's the worst movie ever made, but I'm not a huge fan of it. With that said, though, I also don't really mind as much what they did with Snoke in that movie. I felt he was best served as a narrative tool to propel Kylo Ren further. After all the fan theories that kept coming out on all the craziness that Snoke could have been, I thought it was best to do what they did in The Last Jedi and just let it focus on its core characters instead of building more mystery and trying to live up to all of those expectations. In fact, my only anger with that movie is really directed at what they did with Finn's storyline. I thought that was awful, but now we're getting off track as per usual. Here we go, the dagger. I think part of the reason, and I'm just speculating, is that I think there was a team internal at LucasArts at the time that wanted to do it, Avellone says. So obviously they would have gotten priority over us. So I think that was one factor. Another factor is I think that BioWare tried to do it a few times. They tried to pitch it and we're like, hey, we're going to do a third game, but it just never seemed to actually go anywhere. So I don't know whether people didn't think there'd be enough sales or if they didn't care about doing a single player game. I know a ton of people who would want to play, but obviously maybe those numbers aren't big enough or whatever, so I don't know what the deal was. So the answer is, I don't know, he laughs. It wasn't us. Oh, it just, oh, come on, man. Like, all the attempts and nothing comes to fruition here at all when you have a clearly successful franchise. Well, welcome to my channel if you're new here, where we complain a lot about the fact that KOTOR 3 doesn't exist, but we read interviews of what KOTOR 3 could have been. Yes, I like to torture myself if you couldn't tell. What's more insane about all of this is that we now have 3 separate records of when KOTOR 3 was attempted to be made and then canceled. We have one from BioWare, according to designer John Stafford. We got quite a bit of traction. We wrote a story, designed most of the environments and worlds, many of the quests, characters, and items. However, when the game was close to starting development, LucasArts hit a difficult period in the company's history, which led to the project being canceled. I cry every time. As we all know, we have Chris Avallone's story here, and then on top of that, we have the reboot slash remake that was pitched over at BioWare Austin. So 3 times KOTOR 3 has been attempted. No third time's the charm, though. Oh my god, I can't. Now, this story seems to focus on one sole character traveling the galaxy and seeing the impact of these ancient Sith Lords, rather than the way KOTOR 1 and 2 were structured, where there was a party system and you'd go planet to planet and discover self-contained stories that also tied into the overarching narrative. I kind of like that approach more personally, but it seemed like KOTOR 3 would have been something truly different. And in a second timeline, there probably is a KOTOR 3 like this that exists that maybe is the black sheep, or maybe it's the best entry in the franchise. And that's what I also love to imagine, because this was a new sounding experimental idea. Instead of going to planets in motion, you're going to planets that are destroyed and discovering what these Sith Lords are doing, learning about them through their actions on the planets. Maybe all the planets are barren. This is the crazy stuff that could have happened in a KOTOR 3. Is it the ideal vision? Is it the best vision? Who knows? It never actually happened. But I like the idea of a series that, let's say it was 2008, this just came out. We look at it at this point in time, how different each entry would have been. KOTOR 1 really was focused about rebuilding hope, I felt. It was a very traditional feeling game, and it's why it's my favorite of all time. While KOTOR 2, I believe, is aged better in the modern gaming sphere because of its moral gray approach. It was much darker in nature. There was always an edge to that game that is always hard to put your finger on, and I think it all boils down to Kreia being at the center of a big issue in that title. And then 3 would be you alone, traveling the galaxy, seeing what the Sith Lords are doing to all these planets. To me, those all sound like 3 completely different narrative approaches, and then 3 games that can be amazing for their own reasons. So I trusted Obsidian, I still trust Obsidian, and this would have been a fantastic way to do KOTOR 3, in my honest opinion, but obviously that'll never happen. Hopefully, now that we know Lucasfilms is looking into something KOTOR related, I imagine they will, like I said in the previous video, take the approach of building a show or a movie around the Old Republic and then basing games through that version of the Old Republic. I don't think the KOTOR that you and I know and love will be continued, and quite honestly, in the modern gaming sphere, how things that seem to be so easy to make, like it's such a great idea, you can't mess it up, do end up getting messed up. I'd rather KOTOR just lie in wait, and the only way they bring it back is through an HD collection, a remaster, something along those lines. I wouldn't argue argue, but I'd rather just see a new approach to the Old Republic and do it that way. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments down below. Fortunately, the MMO still gets updates, so we can get the Old Republic fix that way for the time being. Is this the KOTOR 3 you envisioned? Is this what you would enjoy playing, or did you just torture yourself with this and you just wanted to watch and suffer with me? Let me know in the comments down below. Other than that, follow me on Twitter, like me on Facebook. Those links are in the description down below, along with my Patreon, to consider supporting that as it fuels all the content I create here. Stay sexy, stay active. I love you all. Peace.